The sky above New Colony turned dark at exactly noon. Park was teaching his class about Earth history when the first shadow fell across the windows. The children stopped talking. They looked up, felt his heart drop into his stomach. He had seen warships before. 20 years ago, he had served in the United Human Fleet as a military strategist. He had studied alien vessels from a dozen species, but he had never seen anything like the ships that now blocked out the sun. They were massive, black as coal, shaped like curved blades cutting through the clouds. There were at least 30 of them, and they kept coming. More and more until the entire sky was nothing but alien metal. "Everyone stay calm," said. His voice did not shake. He had trained himself never to show fear. "We are going to walk to the emergency shelters, slowly, quietly. Do you understand?" The children nodded. Some were crying. Most were too scared to make any sound at all. Led them through the back door of the school. The streets of New were already filling with panic. People ran in every direction. Mothers carried bobbies. Fathers shouted for their families. The emergency sirens began to wail, but everyone already knew something terrible was happening. The colony of New had been founded 60 years ago. 40,000 humans called it home. They were farmers and engineers and teachers and doctors. They had built their homes on a beautiful world with green forests and blue rivers. They had believed they were safe, so far from any conflict. They had believed the galaxy was mostly peaceful now. They were wrong. The first transport landed in the central plaza. Watched from behind a building as the doors opened and soldiers poured out. They were tall, nearly 7 feet, with gray skin and 4 arms. Their faces had no expression he could read. They carried weapons that hummed with energy. An officer stepped forward and activated a translator device. His voice echoed across the entire colony, amplified by speakers on the ships above. "Humans of this world, you are now property of the Dominion. Do not resist. Resistance means death. You will be taken to labor facilities where you will serve the Dominion. This is not a request. This is your reality now." Felt something cold spread through his chest. He had read about They had conquered 17 species across 3 galactic arms. They were efficient and brutal. They did not negotiate. They did not show mercy. They simply took what they wanted. He got his students to the shelter. Then he ran back out to find his daughter. Park lived on the other side of the colony with her husband and infant son. Pushed through crowds of terrified people. He dodged patrols. He heard screaming from every direction. The aliens were already gathering humans, forcing them into lines at gunpoint. He found his house empty. The door was broken. Inside, furniture was knocked over. There were signs of struggle. "No," whispered. "No, no, no." He ran outside and climbed to a rooftop. From there, he could see the central plaza. Thousands of humans were being herded toward transport ships. Soldiers pushed and shoved anyone who moved too slowly. Children cried for their parents. Parents cried for their children. And there, in the middle of it all, saw his daughter, was clutching her baby to her chest. Her husband was nowhere to be seen. A soldier grabbed her arm and pulled her toward a ship. Almost jumped down, almost ran into the plaza, but he stopped himself. There were hundreds of soldiers down there. If he tried to save her, he would die, and then no one would be left to fight. He watched his daughter disappear into the transport ship. He watched the doors close. He watched the ship rise into the sky and vanish among the clouds. Something inside changed in that moment. Something broke and something else took its place. Fear left him. Sadness left him. All that remained was a cold, burning anger that would never go away. They continued their harvest for 3 more hours. They took nearly 30,000 humans. They left behind the ones who had made it to shelters or hidden in the forests. Probably they thought these survivors would be easy to collect later. When the last transport left, a garrison remained. 500 soldiers set up a command post in the center of the colony. They posted guards at every entrance. They established patrol routes through the streets. Commander, who led the garrison, addressed the remaining humans through the speaker system. You have 3 cycles to surrender yourselves. If you do not, we will burn this colony to ash and hunt you down like animals. The choice is yours. Be smart. Submit. Live as servants rather than die as fools. Night fell on Nu. The stars were hidden by clouds of smoke from burning buildings. Somewhere in the forest, nearly 2,000 humans huddled in caves and makeshift shelters, wondering if they would survive until morning. Found them one group at a time. He moved through the darkness like a ghost, gathering survivors, bringing them together. By midnight, he had collected almost everyone who remained. They met in an old mining cave deep in the hills. Farmers and mechanics and shop owners, a handful of former soldiers, children who had lost their parents, parents who had lost their children. They looked at with hollow eyes, waiting for someone to tell them what to do. An old woman pushed her way to the front of the crowd. Her name was. She was 73 years old, small and thin, with white hair and wrinkled skin. She looked like someone's grandmother. She looked harmless. Knew better. He had heard stories about. Before she came to Nu to retire, she had spent 40 years in special operations. She had done things that were never recorded in any official file. Well, said, her voice quiet but clear, what are we going to do about this? A young man spoke up. His name was who studied alien life forms. We should wait for rescue. Earth will send ships when they realize what happened. Our beacon was destroyed in the attack, replied. Earth has no idea we are in trouble. No help is coming. Then we surrender, someone else said. We have no weapons, no soldiers. How can we fight? Laughed. It was not a happy sound. It was the laugh of someone who had killed more people than she could count and had never lost a night of sleep over it. Let me tell you something about humans, she said. I have studied war my entire life. I have seen what we are capable of when we are pushed too far. These think they know us. They think we are weak because we have no claws, no fangs, no armor. She looked around at the frightened survivors, farmers, teachers, children. They have no idea what they have done. They think this is over. They think we will kneel. She smiled, and there was nothing warm in that smile. But we are humans. We are the species that hunted mammoths with pointy sticks. We are the species that tamed wolves and made them into pets. We are the species that invented fire and then invented ways to throw fire at our enemies. She pointed toward the distant lights of the command post. Those creatures made a very big mistake today. They took our families. They burned our homes. They expect us to give up. Turn 2. Their eyes met, and he saw the same cold anger in her that burned in his own heart. What do you say, teacher? Shall we teach these aliens a lesson they will never forget? Thought of his daughter on that transport ship. He thought of his grandson, barely 6 months old, taken to some labor camp among the stars. He thought of the students he had tried to protect, some of whom were now slaves of the Dominion. Yes, he said, let's teach them what happens when you corner a human. The survivors gathered closer. Fear was still there, but something else was growing now, something dangerous, something that had kept humans alive for 1,000,000 years on a planet filled with predators. They had made a mistake. They had studied human biology but not human history. They knew humans were fragile. They did not know that humans were also the most persistent, most creative, most absolutely ruthless killers the galaxy had ever produced. And now they were about to learn. The first patrol disappeared on the 3rd night after the invasion. 6 soldiers walked into the forest to investigate a strange light. They never walked out. Commander assumed they had gotten lost. The forests of Nu were thick and confusing. He sent another patrol to find them. That patrol disappeared too. On the 4th night, a supply depot exploded, blamed it on an electrical problem. These human buildings were primitive after all, poor wiring, faulty systems. On the 5th night, The water supply to the command post became contaminated with something that made 20 soldiers violently sick. Blamed the local bacteria. Alien worlds had alien diseases. On the sixth night, a guard was found dead at his post. His throat had been cut so cleanly that he had not even made a sound. Could no longer blame bad luck. Someone was hunting his soldiers. Deep in the hills, the human resistance was growing stronger every day. Had organized the survivors into teams. Each team had a specific job. Some gathered food and supplies. Some built hidden shelters. Some trained for combat. And some went hunting. Led the hunting teams. She took only volunteers, and she was very careful about who she accepted. Fighting was not about being strong or brave. It was about being patient, being silent, being willing to do terrible things and not lose your mind afterward. She found 12 people who met her standards. Among them was a young man named. Was 25 years old. Before the invasion, he had been a competitive archer. He had won medals at the Colonial Games. He had never hurt anyone in his life. But when they took his younger sister, something changed inside him. He came to and asked her to teach him how to kill. Archery is not the same as combat, warned him. Shooting targets is not the same as shooting people. Looked at her with eyes that had become very cold. My sister is 8 years old. She is alone on some alien ship right now, probably terrified, probably crying for me. I will do whatever it takes to make these creatures pay for what they did. Studied him for a long moment, then she nodded. Good, you have the right anger. Now I will teach you how to use it. She taught him and the others everything she knew, how to move without making sound, how to hide in shadows, how to approach a target from the direction they least expected, how to kill quickly and quietly. She taught them the weak points of anatomy. They had studied the aliens for years. He knew where their vital organs were. He knew that their gray skin was tough but not tough enough to stop a sharp blade. He knew that they had excellent hearing but poor night vision. The humans used this knowledge well. Every night's teams went out into the darkness. Every night more soldiers died. The aliens never saw their attackers. They never heard them coming. They simply went to sleep and never woke up, or walked into the forest and never came back. Commander grew desperate. He ordered his soldiers to stay in groups of 10 or more. He doubled the guard shifts. He set up motion sensors and alarms around the command post. None of it helped. The humans adapted. They learned to avoid the sensors. They learned to silence the alarms. They found new ways to strike and disappear before anyone knew what had happened. Meanwhile, was building weapons. Was 23 years old, an engineer who had specialized in agricultural equipment. She knew how machines worked. She knew how to build things. And she knew that farming chemicals, when mixed in the right way, could create explosions that destroyed anything nearby. Her workshop was a cave deep in the hills. She worked by lamplight, surrounded by containers of fertilizer and fuel and scrap metal. Her hands were often burned. Her clothes smelled of chemicals, but she never complained. "Every bomb I make is for my father," she told one night. "They shot him in the plaza when he tried to protect my mother. He died in front of me." Put a hand on her shoulder. "We will make them pay, every single one of them." She nodded and went back to work. By the end of the second week, had built 30 explosive devices. Some were small, designed to be thrown. Some were larger, meant to be buried and triggered remotely. All of them were deadly. The resistance began using them against vehicles. Transport trucks exploded on the roads. Patrol ships crashed into the forest. Supply lines became so dangerous that had to send armed escorts with every shipment. But the humans attacked the escorts too. Lee was another key member of the resistance. She was 30 years old, a communications specialist who had worked at the colony's message relay station. She understood technology in ways that most people could not imagine. Thought his communications were secure. He used military encryption, the same encryption that had never been broken in 1,000 years of conquest. Broke it in 6 days. Their code is based on mathematical patterns, she explained too. Very complex but still patterns. Once I found the pattern, I could read everything. Now the humans knew every move the plan to make. They knew when patrols would leave the command post. They knew which routes supply trucks would take. They knew when scheduled meetings and what he said in them. They had no idea their secrets were being read by a woman working in a cave, with equipment she had built from spare parts. 3 weeks after the invasion, made a decision that would cost him dearly. He ordered his soldiers to start executing prisoners. The humans are afraid of us, he told his officers. They are hiding because they fear death. We must remind them that hiding will not save them. For every soldier we lose, we will kill 10 human slaves. The executions happened in the central plaza. Brought prisoners out from the temporary holding cells and shot them in front of cameras. He broadcast the footage across the colony, hoping to break the spirit of the resistance. Instead, he made everything worse. That night gathered her best hunters, 12 men and women who had become as silent and deadly as shadows. She looked at each of them with eyes that burned with cold fury. "Tonight we send a message," she said. "Tonight they learn what fear really means." They moved through the darkness like ghosts, past the motion sensors, past the guard posts, past the patrols that walked the streets every 10 minutes. The command post was a converted government building, 3 floors, heavy walls. Personal quarters were on the top floor, protected by armed guards at every door. The guards died without making a sound. Moved through the building like death itself. She was 73 years old, small and thin, but she had killed more enemies than she could count, and she had not forgotten any of her skills. When she reached quarters, she found him asleep. Part of her wanted to kill him then and there, but that was not the plan. Instead, she and her team killed every other soldier in the building. 37 died that night, throats cut, hearts stopped, lives ended in absolute silence. When they were finished, took a knife and carved a message into the wall of his bedroom. She carved it in script so there would be no misunderstanding. "You should have studied our history." Then she left. She walked right past the sleeping commander, out of the building and back into the forest. Woke up the next morning surrounded by dead soldiers. He read the message on his wall. For the first time in his career, Commander felt something he had never felt before. He felt afraid. The humans were not behaving like conquered people. They were not hiding in fear. They were not waiting to be collected and enslaved. They were fighting back. Sent an emergency message to the High Command. Request immediate reinforcements. The human population is more dangerous than initial assessment indicated. Repeat. Request immediate reinforcements. The response came 12 hours later. Reinforcements. Handle the situation with available resources. Failure will not be tolerated. Stared at the message for a long time. He had 500 soldiers. He had already lost nearly 100. Every day, more disappeared. And somewhere in the forests, nearly 2,000 humans were preparing for war. The commander did not know that these humans were farmers and teachers and engineers. He did not know that most of them had never held a weapon before the invasion. He only knew that they were killing his soldiers with terrifying efficiency. What he did not understand, and what they would never truly understand, was that humans were not dangerous because of their weapons or their technology. Humans were dangerous because they adapted. They learned. They refused to give up. When pushed into a corner, they became something far more deadly than any apex predator the galaxy had ever known. And they were only getting started. The ground war was going well, but knew it would not be enough. They could kill soldiers forever and still lose. Reinforcements would come eventually. More ships, more soldiers, more weapons. The resistance would be crushed. They needed help from Earth, but Earth did not know they were in trouble. Called a meeting in the main cave. The core leaders of the resistance gathered around a makeshift table covered with maps and stolen equipment. Was there, cleaning her knife, sat beside a crate of explosives, sharpened arrowheads, studied a tablet filled with intercepted enemy messages. And there was one new face. Shin was 60 years old, a communications engineer who had helped build the colony's original relay systems. She had spent the last 3 weeks working on a problem that seemed impossible. "I think I have a solution," said, "but it is dangerous, very dangerous." Nodded, "Tell us." Activated a small holographic display. It showed the planet from orbit, with dozens of small dots circling around it. "These are the agricultural satellites," she explained. "They monitor weather, crop health, soil conditions. They destroyed our emergency beacon, but they did not touch these. They probably thought they were useless." "And they are not?" asked. "Not entirely." Zoomed in on one of the satellites. "These units have communication arrays, small ones designed for local data transmission. But if I modify one, I can boost its signal, make it strong enough to reach the nearest human outpost." Leaned forward. "How far is the nearest outpost?" 4 light-years, Sigma Station." The room went quiet. 4 light-years was a long distance. The signal would take 4 years to arrive at normal speed, but was not finished. "However, if I configure the satellite correctly, I can create a transmission. It will use quantum entanglement to bypass normal space. The signal will arrive at Sigma Station within hours." Felt hope spark in his chest for the first time in weeks. "What do you need?" "I need to physically access one of the satellites. That means someone has to fly up there." The hope flickered. They controlled the spaceport. They had anti-aircraft weapons watching the sky. Any ship that took off would be shot down within seconds. "I can fly," said a quiet voice from the back of the cave. Everyone turned to look. A young man stepped forward. His name was Nam. He was 19 years old, barely more than a boy. His face was covered in dirt and his clothes were torn. He looked like he had not slept in days. "I worked at the farming cooperative," said. "I flew crop dusters, spraying fields, checking irrigation systems. I know how to pilot small ships." Looked at him with sharp eyes. "Crop dusters are not combat vehicles. They have plasma cannons and tracking missiles." "I know." His voice did not waver. "But I also know these skis better than anyone. I have flown through storms that would kill most pilots. I have navigated through mountain passes in zero visibility. I can do this." Studied the young man. He saw fear in his eyes, but he also saw determination. This was someone who understood the odds and was willing to accept them anyway. "Why?" asked. "Why are you willing to risk your life?" His jaw tightened. "My mother was on one of the transport ships. She has a heart condition. Without her medicine, she will die within months. Every day I do not act is a day closer to losing her forever." Nobody spoke. Everyone in this cave had lost someone. Everyone had a reason to fight. "Very well," said. "We will get you a ship, but first we need to take the spaceport." The plan came together over the next 3 days. Intercepted communications and learned their patrol schedules. Built special explosives designed to disable the anti-aircraft systems without destroying them completely. Selected her best hunters for a silent infiltration. The spaceport was outside the main colony, connected by a single road through the forest. Had stationed 50 soldiers there, with orders to shoot any human who came within 100 meters. On the night of the attack, clouds covered the stars. The darkness was absolute. His team moved first. They crawled through the underbrush, invisible and silent, planting explosives at the base of the anti-aircraft towers. Each device was connected to a single remote trigger that carried in her pocket. His hunters approached from the opposite direction. They wore dark clothing and blackened their faces with mud. They moved so quietly that even the forest animals did not notice them. At exactly midnight, press the trigger. The explosions were bright and loud. The anti-aircraft towers did not collapse, but their power systems died. Sparks flew from damaged circuits. Alarms began to wail. The soldiers rushed toward the explosions, weapons ready. They did not see the shadows moving behind them. Steam struck from the darkness. Blades flashed. Bodies fell. The hunters had practiced this 100 times in the caves. They knew exactly where to strike, exactly how to kill without giving their enemies time to call for help. In the chaos, sprinted toward the hangar bay. His heart pounded in his chest. His hands shook. But his legs kept moving, carrying him toward the only ship that could save his world. The hangar contained 3 vessels. 2 were patrol craft, sleek and deadly. The third was a human shuttle, an old cargo hauler that had been used to transport equipment between the colony and orbiting stations. Chose the human shuttle. He knew its systems. He had repaired ships like this dozens of times. He climbed into the cockpit and started the engines. The systems came online, glowing softly in the darkness. Behind him, he could hear shouting and gunfire. They had realized they were under attack. His voice crackled through a small radio in his ear. "Are you in position?" "Yes, engine starting now." "Good. I am transmitting the satellite coordinates to your navigation system. You need to reach orbit within 12 minutes, or the satellite will move out of range." 12 minutes. Took a deep breath and grabbed the controls. The shuttle lurched forward, crashing through the hangar doors. Soldiers dove out of the way. Someone fired at the ship and sparks flew from the hull, but the shuttle kept moving. Push the throttle to maximum. The ship roared across the landing pad and angled upward, climbing toward the sky. The ground fell away beneath him. The clouds parted, revealing stars. Behind him, the surviving anti-aircraft batteries tried to track his ship. Red warning lights flashed on his console. Missiles were locking on. Did not fly straight. He could not fly straight. Instead, he threw the shuttle into a series of wild maneuvers that no sane pilot would attempt. He dove toward mountain peaks and pulled up at the last second. He spiraled through cloud formations. He made the ship dance in ways it was never designed to move. 2 missiles roared past him, missing by meters. A third exploded nearby and shrapnel tore holes in the shuttle's wing. Ignored the damage. He kept climbing. The atmosphere thinned. The sky turned from blue to black. The stars became brighter, sharper, more beautiful than had ever seen them. He was in space. His voice came through the radio again. "You are approaching the satellite. I am sending the access codes now. You need to dock with it and install the modification chip I gave you." Looked at the small chip in his pocket. Had spent 3 weeks building it. Everything depended on this tiny piece of technology. The satellite was ahead, a small metal structure floating against the backdrop of stars. Slowed the shuttle and approached carefully. His hands were steady now. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold focus. He docked with the satellite and climbed out of the cockpit. The vacuum of space surrounded him, held back only by the thin fabric of his emergency suit. He had 5 minutes of air. 5 minutes to install the chip and send the signal. He worked quickly. His fingers moved with practiced precision. Open the access panel, remove the old circuit board, install the new chip, close the panel. The satellite hummed to life. New lights blinked on its surface. His voice was barely audible now, full of static. "I am receiving confirmation. The satellite is ready, broadcasting now." Floated beside the satellite and watched as it turned slightly, pointing toward a distant star. Somewhere in that direction, 4 light-years away, was Sigma Station. Somewhere out there, help was waiting. The signal went out. 3 words repeated on every human frequency. "New BUSAN lives." Back on the surface, stood at the entrance of the main cave and watched the sky. He could not see the satellite. He could not see shuttle, but he felt something change in the air around him. Hope, real hope, for the first time since the invasion. 4 light-years away, aboard Sigma Station, a communications officer named Ryu was eating dinner when her console began beeping. She put down her food and checked the incoming transmission. Her face went pale. Within minutes, she was running toward the command center, shouting for Admiral Bay. The Admiral was a veteran of 3 wars, a man who had never panicked in his life. But when he read the message from Nu, even he felt his heart skip a beat. 40,000 civilians, enslaved by a resistance fighting for survival. Looked at his fleet deployment chart. The 3rd Fleet was stationed at Sigma, 47 ships, not nearly enough to challenge the Dominion directly, but maybe enough to save 1 colony. "How long until we can reach Nu?" he asked. His aide checked the calculations. 12 days at maximum speed, sir. Turned to face his command staff. These were men and women who had sworn to protect humanity. Now humanity was calling for help. "Plot a course," he ordered. "Every ship maximum speed, we leave in 1 hour." His aide hesitated. "Sir, intelligence reports suggest they have 300 ships in that sector. We will be outnumbered 6 to 1. Smiled, and there was something dangerous in that smile. "Then we will have to fight harder. Alert the crews. Tell them we are going to war." The signal had been sent. Help was on the way. Now the people of Nu just had to survive long enough for it to arrive. The High Command received the report of approaching human ships and dismissed it as a joke. 47 vessels against 300. The mathematics made no sense. This was not a battle. This was suicide. Fleet Commander studied the tactical display with forearmed confidence. The humans were coming in a straight line, not even attempting to hide their approach. Either they were incredibly stupid or incredibly desperate. "They must believe we will negotiate," said to his officers. "They think we will release the prisoners if they show force. How pathetic." He ordered his fleet to form a defensive perimeter around Nu. 300 warships, each one larger and more powerful than anything the humans had brought. The battle would be over in hours. Did not know that Admiral Bay had studied tactics for 20 years. He did not know that human military strategy was built on thousands of years of warfare against other humans, the most dangerous enemy the galaxy had ever produced. And he did not know that humans did not fight fair. The 3rd Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at exactly 600 local time. 47 ships appeared on the sensors, forming a wedge pattern that pointed directly at the enemy formation. Admiral stood on the bridge of the carrier, indomitable. He was 60 years old, with gray hair and a face marked by decades of difficult decisions. Around him, his command staff worked in focused silence. "Open a channel to the fleet," ordered. "All frequencies." The communications officer nodded. "Channel open, sir." His voice went out across the void of space, reaching every ship in the system. "This is Admiral Bay of the United Human Fleet. You have taken human civilians from Nu Colony. You have 6 hours to return them unharmed. For every hour past that deadline, we will destroy 10 of your ships. This is not a negotiation. This is your only warning." On his flagship, Commander laughed out loud. The human admiral was bluffing. He had to be bluffing. "Tell the human that we do not accept his terms," replied. "Tell him that if he does not retreat immediately, we will destroy his pathetic fleet and add his crew to our slave population." Received the reply and smiled. He had expected nothing less. "All ships," he commanded. "Battle Formation Alpha, engage." The battle began with fire and thunder. The first wave of human ships dove directly into the formation. It looked like madness. They were flying straight at the enemy guns, making no attempt to evade or dodge. Watched with satisfaction as his ships opened fire. Plasma bolts and missiles filled the space between the fleets. Several human ships exploded, their crews dying in balls of flame. But then something strange happened. The human ships did not stop. They did not retreat. They kept coming even as they burned, even as they died. And they were not aiming at warships. Captain O commanded the destroyer. Her ship had taken 17 direct hits. Half her crew was dead. Fires burned in 3 compartments. The engines were failing. She did not care. "Navigation," she said calmly. "Set collision course for the carrier directly ahead, maximum speed." Her navigator looked at her with wide eyes. "Captain, that will." "I know what it will do. Execute the order." They accelerated toward the carrier. Enemy guns pounded its hull, tearing holes in the armor. Systems failed one by one, but the engines kept burning. Activated the ship-wide communication system. Her voice reached every surviving member of her crew. "This is the captain. I want you all to know that it has been an honor serving with you. Today, we show the galaxy what humanity is made of. We do not surrender. We do not run. We fight until the end, and we take our enemies with us." She paused and then began to sing. It was an old soldier's song, one that had been passed down for generations. One by one, her crew joined in. They hit the carrier's engine core at full speed. The explosion was massive. It consumed both ships and spread outward in a wave of destruction that caught 17 more vessels. They died together, human and alien, in a ball of fire that could be seen across the entire system. Commander stared at the tactical display in disbelief. One human ship had just destroyed 18 of his vessels, not through superior technology, not through clever tactics, through pure, stubborn refusal to give up. The humans kept coming. Lieutenant IM was 28 years old. He flew a small fighter, barely more than a cockpit with engines and weapons attached. His squadron had started with 12 pilots. Now only 3 remained. They had fought through the outer formation. They had dodged missiles and plasma fire. They had lost friends and watched them die. Now they had a clear path to the flagship. "Wing 2, Wing 3, said over the radio. "Follow me in. We hit the hangar bay, we drop our payload, we get out. Simple." "Nothing about this is simple," Wing 2 replied. Her name was. She had a husband waiting for her back at Sigma Station. "Then let's make it look simple. On my mark." The 3 fighters dove toward the flagship. Anti-aircraft fire filled the space around them like a deadly rain. Flew through it with skills learned in 100 training exercises and perfected in a dozen real battles. The hangar bay opened before them. Interceptors were launching, trying to stop the approaching humans. Ignored them. He had eyes only for his target. "Wing 3, cover us. Wing 2, with me." They flew into the hangar bay at full speed. For a moment, everything was chaos. Crew members dove for cover. Equipment exploded. Fuel lines ruptured. Released his payload. 2 high-yield bombs dropped from his fighter and hit the hangar floor. He did not make it out. The bombs detonated just as his fighter crashed into a stack of ammunition. The combined explosion tore through the flagship like a fist through paper. Secondary explosions rippled through the ship's interior. Power systems failed. Life support died. Commander was on the bridge when the shockwave hit. The last thing he saw was his tactical display going dark, ship after ship disappearing from his fleet. Then the ceiling collapsed, and he saw nothing at all. The fleet fell into chaos. Without their flagship, without their commander, individual captains had to make their own decisions. Some tried to fight. Some tried to retreat. None of them coordinated. Admiral saw his opportunity and seized it. "All ships break formation. Hunt them down, no mercy." The human fleet scattered, each ship picking its own targets. They moved like wolves among sheep, striking fast and moving on before they could respond. Where the aliens expected organized formations, they found individual predators. Where they expected retreat, they found aggression. By the end of 11 hours, 212 ships had been destroyed. 41 human ships remained. The mathematics made no sense, but mathematics had never been humanity's specialty. Surviving was humanity's specialty. On the surface of Nu, the resistance watched the battle through intercepted communications. They saw the explosions in orbit. They heard the panicked reports from enemy officers. And they knew it was time to move. The garrison had received orders to execute all prisoners if the human fleet won the battle. Commander, still traumatized from the message carved into his wall, prepared to carry out these orders with grim determination. He never got the chance. Led the final assault personally. 2,000 humans armed with stolen weapons, homemade explosives, and a burning hunger for revenge. They hit the garrison from every direction at once. They fought hard. They were trained soldiers with superior weapons, but they were also terrified. They had spent weeks watching their comrades disappear in the night. They had slept with one eye open, expecting death to come for them at any moment. Now death had come, and it wore the faces of farmers and teachers. Moved through the chaos like a spirit of vengeance. She was 73 years old, but she killed with the precision of a machine. Led a team of archers who put arrows through eyes from 50 meters away, threw explosives that turned enemy fortifications into rubble, and searched for the prisoners. He found them in a holding facility behind the command post. Hundreds of humans, captured during the initial invasion and held for transport. They were thin and frightened, but they were alive. Among them was his daughter. Looked up as the door opened. She was clutching her son to her chest, the same way she had been when they took her. Her eyes went wide. Father crossed the room and wrapped his arms around her. For a moment, he was not a resistance leader. He was not a soldier. He was just a father holding his daughter and grandson, feeling a joy so intense it made his whole body shake. "I told you I would come for you," he whispered. "I told you." Was crying. I never stopped believing. I never stopped. Outside, the sounds of battle continued. But here, in this small room, there was only love and relief and the promise of a better tomorrow. The resistance won. Every soldier in the garrison was either killed or captured. Commander was found hiding in his quarters, surrounded by the bodies of his guards. He surrendered without a fight. When the human fleet sent shuttles down to the surface, they found 2,000 survivors standing in the ruins of their colony. These were not victims waiting to be rescued. These were warriors who had already won their own battle. Admiral landed personally to meet with the resistance leaders. He walked through the crowd, looking at the faces of farmers and teachers who had become soldiers. He stopped in front of and saluted. "On behalf of the United Human Fleet, I want to thank you for your service," said. "You held this colony against impossible odds. You sent the signal that brought us here. You are heroes." Shook his head. "We are not heroes. We are just people who refuse to give up." Smiled. "That is what heroes are." The admiral looked around at the gathered survivors. He saw, cleaning her knife as always. He saw, covered in soot from her last explosion. He saw, his quiver empty, his bow broken. The thought they knew what they were dealing with, said. They thought humans were weak. They thought we would surrender. He turned back to. They had no idea they were poking the most dangerous species in the galaxy. But now they know. And soon, everyone will know. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. The Dominion requested a ceasefire 3 days after the Battle of Nu. Their High Arbiter, a massive creature named who had ruled 17 conquered worlds, demanded a meeting to discuss terms. Admiral agreed. The meeting would take place on a neutral station called Gateway, a trading post that belonged to no species. Diplomats from a dozen worlds gathered to witness what promised to be a historic conversation. Did not bring diplomats. He brought, and 6 other survivors from Nu, farmers and teachers who had become killers, ordinary people who had done extraordinary things. The conference room was large and circular, with seats arranged around a central table. The delegation entered first. High Arbiter was at their head, standing nearly 8 feet tall, with 4 arms folded across his chest. Behind him came generals and advisors, all wearing expressions of barely controlled anger. They had never lost a battle like this. They had never been humiliated so completely. The human delegation entered next, walked in front wearing his formal uniform. Behind him came the survivors of Nu. They did not wear uniforms. They wore the same clothes they had worn during the resistance. Dirty, torn, stained with sweat and blood. They looked like refugees. They looked like victims. Did not understand why they were here. The two groups took their seats. For a long moment no one spoke. The tension in the room was thick enough to taste. Finally broke the silence. "Your species confuses us," he said. His voice was deep and echoing like stones grinding together. "You are weak, fragile, you have no natural weapons, your skin tears easily, your bones break with minimal force." He gestured at the survivors with one of his 4 arms. "Yet you fight as if death means nothing. You throw yourselves against superior forces without hesitation. You refuse to surrender even when surrender is the only logical option." Listened without expression. He had heard similar words before, from soldiers in the moments before he killed them. "Explain this to us," continued. "How does a species so physically weak become so dangerous? What are we missing?" Stood up. She was the smallest person in the room, 73 years old, barely 5 feet tall, with white hair and wrinkled skin. The guards shifted nervously. They had heard stories about this old woman. "Let me explain something to you," said. Her voice was quiet but carried clearly through the room. "On our world we have a saying, the nail that sticks up gets hammered down. Your people came to our colony and stuck up. You took our children. You burned our homes. You expected us to submit because every other species did." She smiled, and there was nothing warm in that smile. "But we are not every other species. We are the ones who looked at wolves, creatures with fangs and claws and the instinct to kill, and thought, those would make good pets. We tamed them. We turned apex predators into animals that sleep at the foot of our beds." Shifted uncomfortably. He had never had a conquered species speak to him this way. "We are the ones who crossed oceans in wooden boats," continued. "Not because we had to, because we wanted to see what was on the other side. We are the ones who climbed the highest mountains and dove to the deepest trenches. We went to places that should have killed us, just to prove that we could." She took a step toward the delegation. The guards raised their weapons but waved them down. "We are the ones who split the atom," said. "We unlocked the power that holds the universe together, and then, immediately, we wondered if we could make it bigger, stronger, more destructive." She was standing directly in front of Now. She had to crane her neck to look up at him, this tiny old woman facing an alien giant. "You have conquered species that evolved without competition, herbivores who never learned to fight, ambush predators who never faced anything that fought back, creatures who surrendered because that was the smart thing to do." Shook her head slowly. "Humans did not evolve as the apex predators of our world. We became them. We hunted everything else into submission or extinction. And when we ran out of things to hunt, we started hunting each other. We spent 10,000 years fighting ourselves because we had already defeated every other threat." Stood and joined. The other survivors followed, 8 humans facing the rulers of 17 worlds. "My daughter was on one of your transport ships," said. "She was terrified. She thought she would never see her home again. She thought her son would grow up as a slave." His voice was calm, but there was iron beneath the words. "I spent 6 weeks watching your soldiers die. I watched farmers kill trained warriors. I watched teachers become assassins. I watched children who had never hurt anyone learn to set explosives and cut throats." He looked at with eyes that held no fear. "You did that to us. You turned peaceful people into weapons, and now you want to know why we are dangerous." Admiral placed it on the table. He slid it toward the delegation. "This is a map of your 17 conquered worlds," he said. "This contains your fleet deployments, your supply lines, your command structure. We have had this information for 6 hours." Went pale, his forearms dropped to his sides. "You're bluffing," he said, but his voice was uncertain. "A communications specialist from a farming colony broke your encryption in her spare time," replied. "We know where every ship in your dominion is positioned. We know the names of your family members. We know the access codes to your personal quarters." He stood and straightened his uniform. "The Dominion has 2 options. Release every human prisoner you have ever taken. Pay reparations for the damage you have caused. Withdraw from any system within 50 light-years of human space." His jaw tightened. "And if we refuse?" "Then we stop playing defense." Gestured to the survivors behind him. Farmers, teachers, an engineer, an archer, an old woman who had killed more than she could count. "You thought you were conquering a colony. You were actually kicking a hornet's nest. You attacked a species that never gives up, never forgets, and never forgives." He leaned forward, his hands flat on the table. "We hold grudges for generations. There are humans alive today who still hate people for things that happened 1,000 years ago. You think this ends with a treaty. You think we will sign a piece of paper and forget what you did." The room was silent. Looked at the human delegation with new eyes. These were not diplomats. These were not politicians. These were predators wearing the faces of ordinary people. "Congratulations," High Arbiter said. "You have officially ignited a war with humanity's apex predators. Now you get to decide how it ends." They accepted the terms within a week. 17,000 human prisoners were returned. Reparations were paid. Borders were established and respected. The Dominion retreated behind their new lines and never crossed them again. Children were taught about the humans, about the small, fragile creatures who had defeated the greatest military power in the galaxy. They were taught to avoid them, to never provoke them, to remember what happened at New. Park returned to teaching. His school reopened in the rebuilt colony, filled with children who had survived the occupation. He taught them history and mathematics and science. He never spoke about the things he had done during the resistance. But sometimes, late at night, he would stand at his window and look at the stars. He would think about his daughter, safe now with her son. He would think about the friends he had lost and the enemies he had killed. He would think about the old woman named who had taught farmers how to become warriors. And he would remember why he had fought. Lived another 12 years after the liberation. She died peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by people who loved her. On her deathbed, someone asked if she had any regrets about the things she had done during the war. She laughed. It was the same cold laugh she had given on the night of the invasion, when she promised to teach the what happened when you cornered a human. "My only regret is that they surrendered so quickly. I was just getting started." Those were her last words. The galaxy learned a new phrase in the following centuries. It spread from species to species, passed along as both warning and wisdom. Traders spoke it in port bars. Soldiers whispered it in barracks. Diplomats wrote it in treaties. Never corner a human. They do not know how to give up. They only know how to make you regret it. They learned this lesson the hard way. They were not the last species to make this mistake. Others came, over the years, conquerors and raiders and those who thought themselves superior. They all learned the same lesson. Humanity was not the strongest species in the galaxy. They were not the most technologically advanced. But they were the most stubborn, the most creative, the most absolutely ruthless when pushed too far. They were the species that looked at every challenge, every obstacle, every enemy, and said the same thing. "We will not stop, we will not surrender, we will find a way." And that, in the end, was more dangerous than any weapon. The war for New was over. The The story of what happened there would be told for 1,000 years. It was a story about farmers becoming soldiers, about teachers becoming assassins, about ordinary people doing impossible things because they refused to accept defeat. It was a story about humanity. And it was only the beginning.